At 69, I finally booked a proper doctor's appointment here in Launceston, Tasmania. And what I braced myself for was the full American nightmare, but what actually happened that Tuesday morning was nothing like it. Before I tell you how it went for me, it'd really mean a lot if you'd subscribe and leave a like. It honestly helps us out over here, and after 10 years of doing this, it's still the thing that keeps me on the porch talking to you folks. Now let me paint you the picture I carried across the Pacific, because it's probably the same one sitting in your chest right now. Back in the States, a doctor's visit was never just a doctor's visit. It was the clipboard. You know the one. That thick stack of insurance questions at the front desk, and the lady behind the glass asking for your card before she even asks your name. It was the waiting room, full, a line backed up to the door, folks staring at the floor, and worst of all, it was the bill. Not that day, weeks later. A 4-figure envelope that showed up when you'd almost let yourself forget about it, with numbers on it you couldn't make sense of no matter how long you squinted. That's the knot in your stomach I'm talking about. That tight little fist you feel before you've even seen anyone. And honestly, for years, that fist ran my whole calendar. Have you been putting off going to the doctor because of what it might cost? Be straight with yourself for a second. I did that for years back home. A twinge in the knee, a cough that hung around, the blood pressure I probably should have kept an eye on. I'd tell myself it could wait. And it could, right up until it couldn't. That's the quiet thing nobody says out loud. A whole lot of us didn't skip the doctor because we were tough. We skipped him because we were scared of the envelope. So that's the dread I packed. I'm Jim, I'm 69, and I've been living here in Australia for 10 years now, long enough that you'd think I'd have shaken all of it off. But that old American reflex runs deep. 10 years in, and the morning I finally sat down to book a real appointment, my hands still hovered over the phone like I was about to agree to something expensive. Let me set the scene for you, so you can point at it on a map. Launceston sits up in the north of Tasmania, that green little island hanging off the bottom of Australia. It's a small city, an easy one. The Tamar River runs right through the heart of it, wide and slow, and my street looks down toward it. Mornings here, the light comes in soft and pale over the water, nothing like that hard gray back home. I've got my coffee cup on the wooden table out on the porch, the cockatoos making a racket somewhere off in the gums, and that's where I was sitting when I made the call. The clinic I rang is a plain little place on a quiet street, a short walk down toward the Tamar River. No towering hospital complex, no parking garage that costs you before you've even seen a nurse. Just a doctor's office on a suburban corner, the kind you'd stroll right past. Now, I promised you I'd always shoot straight with you, so here's the honest bit before I get to any of the good news. This life isn't free of friction, and I'd never pretend it is. Private health cover here costs money every single month. It's real money, and it leaves my account whether I see a doctor or not. And in a smaller city like Launceston, if you need a specialist, sometimes you wait a little longer than a fella down in Sydney or Melbourne might. That's just true. I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you. But hold on to that, because it matters less than you'd think, and I'll show you why. Here's the part I want you to hear, though. That Tuesday morning being so easy, it wasn't luck. It wasn't me getting lucky in a friendly little town. It came down to one piece of homework I'd sorted out long before I ever stepped on the plane. And this is where I want to be useful to you, not just tell you a nice story. Because in 10 years here, I've watched a lot of good people arrive and then go scrambling for health cover advice from all the wrong places. A forum post from some fella who left in 2009, a cousin's neighbor who heard something once. Half answers that send you in circles. That's exactly why I put together the practical ebook inside the One-Way Club, the One-Way Guide. It won't fill out a single form for you, I'll be honest about that. What it does is lay out the health cover steps to sort before you ever fly in the right order, so you're not guessing. Thousands of folks are in that club now, sorting this the calm way instead of the scrambling way. If that's the kind of clear head you want going into this, the link's down in the description. Or scan the code on your screen. Because that's the whole secret to a morning like the one I had. Not being brave. Just doing the small, boring homework early, so the big scary thing turns out to be nothing at all. So picture me again. 69, coffee going cold, the river down the hill, that old knot in my stomach that I hadn't quite managed to leave behind in America. I dialed the clinic on the quiet street, fully expecting a fight. A wait for an appointment weeks out, a voice asking me for a card number before it asked me how I was feeling. And what I got instead is the whole reason I'm sitting here telling you this. But before I walk you through what happened when I actually got there, and before I read you the bill line by line the way I read my own bank statement, you need to understand the one thing that made all of it easy. That piece of homework I keep mentioning, how Medicare and a private top-up actually fit together for a retiree like me. Because I didn't figure that out here in a panic. I sorted it a decade back before I ever flew over, and I'm about to walk you through exactly how I set it up. So here's how it actually went. Years before I ever booked a flight, I sat down at the kitchen table one quiet afternoon and sorted out two pieces. Just two. The first is Medicare, and I got into it through what they call the reciprocal arrangement, an agreement between the United States and Australia that lets a fella like me tap into the public system for the medically necessary stuff. The second piece is a private hospital and extras cover on top of that. I compared a handful of plans, picked the one that fit me, and that was that. 10 years later, I've barely had to think about it again. And I know how that sounds from where you're sitting. Two systems, one foreign country, a card you've never held before. Is the system really that complicated? No. Once you know the two pieces and how they lock together, the whole thing fits over a cup of coffee. Medicare covers the backbone. The private cover fills the gaps and gets you into a hospital bed a little faster if you ever need one. That's it. That's the puzzle. If you're picturing endless forms right now, stay with me. It was far simpler than I expected. I braced for a mountain of paperwork and got a molehill. A little homework up front, one relaxed afternoon of reading, and then years of not worrying. That's the trade. And it's a good one. Now, back to that Tuesday. The clinic I go to sits on a quiet street down near the Tamar River. The kind of street where you can hear the water if the traffic's light. Little brick building, a few gum trees out front, nothing fancy. I called on a Monday, and a woman at the front desk, warm voice, no rush in it, pulled up the calendar and said, "Come in tomorrow morning. We've got you at 9. The very next morning, no line out the door. No clipboard, the size of a phone book, no drama. Just, come on in, Jim. We'll see you then." I want you to sit with that for a second, because I remember exactly what that used to feel like back home. You'd call for an appointment and they'd give you a slot 3 weeks out. Then you'd show up, sit in a waiting room under those humming lights, watch the clock crawl, and finally get pulled back for what felt like a pit stop. In and out, meter running the whole time. You could practically feel them counting the minutes. That's not what happened by the Tamar River. I got shown into the room, and there was Dr. Anita Fields. Gray hair, reading glasses pushed up into it, the way some folks do when they're about to really look at you instead of a screen. She sat down. She didn't hover by the door with her hand on the handle. She said, and I remember it word for word, "No rush, Jim. Tell me everything. Tell me everything." When's the last time a doctor said that to you and meant it? She gave me 20 full minutes. 20 unhurried minutes where the only clock in the room was the one on the wall and neither of us was watching it. She asked about the aches, the sleep, the little things you usually don't bother mentioning because you can see the next patient waiting. Anita Fields wanted to hear all of it. And I walked out of there feeling like an actual human being who'd been listened to, not a line item on somebody's schedule. That difference, 20 call minutes here versus the 8 rushed ones back home, that's the thing I wish I could bottle and hand to every one of you thinking about this move. It's not on any brochure. It's just how a lot of medicine works out here, especially in a smaller place where the doctor might see you at the shops on Saturday. Now, I promised you I'd always shoot straight, and I'm not about to paint you a picture with no clouds in it. So here's the honest part. The one thing that isn't rosy. Private cover isn't free. That hospital and extras plan is a real bill that lands every single month, and I'll tell you the exact figure in a minute, but I won't pretend it costs nothing. It doesn't. And the second thing, in a smaller city like Launceston, when you need a specialist, not a regular doctor, but a specialist for something particular, you sometimes wait a bit longer than you would down in Sydney or Melbourne. Fewer specialists in a small town? Simple as that. If I needed a certain kind of heart fella, I might wait a few weeks where a big city retiree might get in sooner. There. I said it plain because you deserve plain. But notice, I'm not scaring you with it, I'm just being square. A monthly premium and an occasional wait for a specialist, that's the friction. And for the calm mornings I get in return, I'll take that trade every day of the week and twice on Sunday. Now let's move on, because it's a small cloud in a very big blue sky. What made all of this feel easy, the Medicare piece, the private cover, the walking in tomorrow morning part, none of it was luck and none of it was me being clever. It was those small preparation steps I took before I ever flew over. Knowing which cover to compare, knowing what a retiree actually needs versus what the glossy pamphlet tries to upsell you, knowing the order to do things in so you land here already covered instead of scrambling. Get those little steps right, and a system that sounds frightening from across the ocean turns into a relaxed cup of coffee kind of afternoon. That's the whole secret. There's no magic to it. There's just doing the homework once so you can stop thinking about it forever. So picture where I'm standing at this point in the story. The appointment was booked overnight. The doctor gave me 20 minutes and told me to tell her everything. I've got Medicare behind me and my private cover in my back pocket. Everything was calm. Everything was unhurried. Honestly, it was one of the pleasantest mornings I'd had in a while, and that alone would have been a nice little tale to tell you. But the appointment, the doctor, the chat, the whole friendly business of it, that was the easy part. That's not the thing that floored me. The thing I never saw coming, the part I genuinely did not expect, was what happened when I walked up to that front desk to settle the bill. The number I saw, what that morning actually cost me, and I want to read it out to you the way I read my own bank statement, line by line, plain as day, nothing rounded off. The standard visit, a proper sit-down consult with the doctor, was billed at 90 Australian dollars. That's about 60 US dollars in the money you and I still count in our heads. And I braced for that. 60 bucks, fine, I can live with 60 bucks. But here's where it started to go sideways in the best possible way. Because that $90 wasn't what I actually paid. Medicare, through the arrangement I sorted out 10 years back, took its slice. The rebate came off the top before I'd even reached for my wallet. And what was left for me to settle, the whole out-of-pocket for sitting with Dr. Anita Fields for 20 unhurried minutes was 40 Australian dollars, roughly 26 US dollars. $26. Do the math with me on this one. $40 for the visit that used to cost me a month of worry back home. I stood at that little desk near the window, the one that looks out toward the Tamar River, and I actually asked the young fella at reception if that was the full amount. He just smiled and said, "That's you sorted, Jim." That was it. No second bill in the mail, no surprise letter 3 weeks later, sorted. Now, you're a smart person, and you're already thinking, well, Jim, that's the visit, but what about the cover? What's it cost to you every month to have Medicare and a top-up sitting behind you? Fair question. So let me lay that one out too. My private hospital and extras cover runs 185 Australian dollars a month. That's near 120 US dollars. And I want you to hold that number still for a second, because back in the States, that was less than one copay. One. A single specialist copay, the kind you paid just to walk through the door and shake the man's hand, used to run me more than a whole month of cover does here. Let that arithmetic sit with you. And then there was the blood test. Dr. Fields wanted a couple of things checked. Nothing dramatic, just the sort of numbers a doctor likes to see at 69. She sent me down the hall to the pathology room that same afternoon. Rolled up my sleeve, in and out in 10 minutes. And that blood test was bulk billed. Nothing out of pocket. Not a dollar. I kept waiting for the catch, the little slip of paper with a figure on it, and it never came because there was no figure. Medicare covered the lot. So let me hold all of this up against the old life, the way I promised you I would. Back in the States, that same sit-down consult and that same lab work together would have run me several $100s easy. And that's before the fun part. The part where you don't even know the number for weeks. You'd get the bill in the mail, and there'd be a line for the doctor, a line for the lab, a line for something called a facility fee that nobody ever explained, and a note saying your insurance was, quote, still processing, a month of not knowing. A month of that little knot in your stomach every time you walked past the mailbox. Here, I knew the number before I left the building. $40 for the visit, $185 a month for the cover, nothing for the blood test. 3 lines, all of them said out loud to my face by a friendly kid at a desk, no processing, no facility fee, no month of dread. That's the difference. And it's not a small one. Now here's the part I genuinely did not see coming. The part the whole morning had been building toward without me knowing it. I walked out of that clinic on the quiet street, into the sun coming off the river, and I felt light, relaxed. I'd paid less for a proper morning of healthcare than I'd pay for a decent dinner for 2 down at the surf club on a Friday. And I remember standing on the footpath thinking, that's it? That's the thing I dreaded the entire flight across the Pacific? But it wasn't over. 2 days later, I'm out on the porch with a coffee, and the phone rings on the table beside me. I pick it up, and it's Dr. Anita Fields. Not a nurse, not an automated message telling me to log into a portal and reset a password I've forgotten 4 times. Her. Reading glasses probably still pushed up in that gray hair of hers, calling me herself to walk me through my results. All good, Jim, she said. Nothing to worry about, but I wanted to tell you myself. The doctor phoned me personally 2 days later, just to put my mind at ease. That's the thing I didn't expect. Not the low number, though the number floored me plenty. It was the warmth. It was a busy GP taking 2 minutes out of her afternoon to ring an old American on his porch and say, "You're fine. Sleep easy." Warmer, cheaper, and kinder than anything I'd braced myself for. Every worry I carried across that ocean, and the reality was a phone call and a cup of coffee. So let me call back that number one more time, because it's the whole story in 4 syllables. The entire morning, the consult with Dr. Fields, the 20 unhurried minutes, the blood test down the hall, the peace of mind, all of it came to $40 out of my pocket. $40 and a cup of coffee's worth of calm. That's what a doctor's morning costs at 69 out here. And I'll be straight with you, the way I've been the whole time, that $185 a month isn't free money. And in a smaller city like this one, you'll sometimes wait a touch longer for a specialist than you would down in Sydney. I told you that earlier, and I'll stand by it. But a little patience and $185 against a system that phones you personally and hands you the bill to your face for $40, I'd make that trade every single day of the week. I did make it 10 years ago, and I've never once looked back. So here's what I want you to do with all of this. If you've been dreading this the way I did, if you've got that same knot in your stomach that I carried for years, I want you to picture $40 and a phone call from your own doctor. That's not a dream. That's not me selling you a postcard. That's the reality waiting for you, and it's within reach if you do the small preparation first. If you sort the cover before you fly the way I laid out for you. The sun's dropping now over the porch. Any minute the cockatoos will start up in the big eucalyptus by the fence, screeching their heads off the way they do every dusk, loud as a car alarm and twice as cheerful. And I'll sit here with the last of my coffee and think about how much of my life I spent bracing for a bill that out here was $40 and a kind word. So run the numbers yourself. $40 out of pocket, $185 a month behind you, a doctor who calls you by your first name. That's what a healthy, easy retirement morning really costs at 69 in Australia. And I promise you, it's well within reach. Take your time, do the small homework, and come on out. The porch is warm, and there's plenty of room.